Hello and welcome. You are listening to Moodally Matters, the podcast that recognizes that your mood matters. Every episode, we talk to a range of amazing guests with experience in some of the top organizations in the world, discussing work life at the crossroads of mood, well-being, and performance. Together, we aim to create better workplaces, one mood at a time. Let's get started with your host, Moodally founder, Erika First.
Hello and welcome. I am Erika First, your host of Moodally Matters. My guest today is fashion and luxury CMO, Chiara Bernardi. Having spent her career in some of the most famous brands in the business, she shares with us the importance of job design, clear communication, and understanding employees' individual motivation drivers as absolutely critical to helping employees do their best. Now on to the episode.
Good morning, Chiara, and
Hi.
thank you for being with us and speaking with us today.
Hi, Erika. How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Can you start out by telling us a little bit about your professional journey and what you've done to bring you to where you are today?
Yes. So, first of all, I'm very glad to be here and talk about this topic that is very dear to me. I'm an executive, a chief marketing officer in the luxury and fashion industry, let's say. I started almost 20 years ago in a company that was in a completely different environment and industry. So I was in a company producing large kitchen appliances, so not very glamorous and sexy at that time, but it was probably the best working experience I've ever had, thanks to the people that were working with me, the people I learned from. And I learned from that experience that most of the times it's not the prestige of the industry you work in, but it's really the environment and the people you work with. But we'll get to that pretty much soon, probably. And then I moved to one of the largest companies in the beauty industry for a short experience. And then I have a very long tenure in a big multinational company, where I spent 14 years, in which I did a fantastic career path, I would say. I started off as a brand manager, and then I moved internationally. I moved to Singapore as the chief of marketing for the APAC region. So I had the regional experience. And then from there, I moved straight to New York as vice president of marketing for the American division. And then almost 1.5 years ago, probably, I moved back to Italy, where I'm originally from. And I decided to join a company in the luxury and fashion environment. And recently I decided to quit and move to another much smaller company within the same environment still, but with a more, probably, I hope, since I haven't started yet, with a better balance between work and personal time, and probably also with a different working environment.
Which is a fantastic segue to what was going to be my next question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about the work environments that you've had to deal with, and what are some of the dynamics, for better or for worse, that you've come across over your career?
Yeah, as I was saying, I learned over time that actually what matters the most when you choose a place where to work is the working environment, the people you will have to deal with, and your boss. Because I have been experiencing many different working environments. Luckily, I've been experiencing a working environment in which you are valued, you are appreciated, you are given some space to risk, and you are given a very clear objective and a very clear direction, which doesn't mean a numeric objective, you have to sell this amount, but it's literally the strategic objective are very much shared. are very much discussed, and so you can actually put some creativity on it and bring your value into. Other working environment, which has been very stressful for me, are very uptight, very traditional environment where there is very little space for some chill out moments, or some just moment of bonding with your coworkers, and most of all, places where the strategic direction is so unclear, or it's clear to a very restricted number of people, but is not shared with the entire team, that you don't really understand, am I contributing? Am I doing something that is valuable? Or I'm literally going in a direction that leads nowhere. Especially, this past coming back to Italy and having to readjust to the Italian workspace style, let's say, has been very challenging in the past year.
And well, it's interesting to hear you talk about like well-being in a job as having to do with being clear on what your objectives are, having room to also put your own personal fingerprint or thought into doing that. Because I think a lot of time when we think about wellness at work, it's around the ideas of, apps, or do I have health benefits, or do I have this? How much of that, how much do you think that wellness is tied to your ability to do your job well?
Well, I'm speaking from a privileged standpoint, because I've always been working for large companies in which all the thing that you mentioned, like health benefits and insurances and all that things was covered, and I never had to stress too much about that. And the working environment was healthy, sometimes even beautiful. So I know that I am privileged in that respect. So what matters to me most is literally being, more feeling very much engaged on an intellectual level. More than very small and practical thing. And there is also a difference, I think, between when I started working and today. My needs have changed. So maybe when I started working, I was 20 years old or 25. What mattered to me the most was my co-workers. Are we friends or friendly? Can we go out and have a drink all together? That would be things that would just matters to me. Today, probably I have a different scale of need, and probably what make me works the best is the fact of knowing that I am trusted. I have 20 years of experience, so I believe that if you hire me because you know that I can technically do the job, so I don't have to prove it to you every single day, every time, but that you're listening to my advice, you're listening to my opinion and what I have to say on one side. And on the other side is also allow me some space to manage my life, not just my working life, but also my personal life, my interest, I have a family, but this doesn't matter at all, meaning that I think that every person with or without a family have their own personal life outside of work. So allow me to have some, wiggle room to manage my schedule in a way that is less stressful, which not necessarily means working from home, because we've all have experienced in the past 2 years what a nightmare can be working from home. But it's like, if I have to, switch off for maybe 1 hour to just watch my kid practice soccer, I can do that, and then I can go back to work and maybe work even longer. But I gave my attention to what was mattering to me at that time.
Right. So more on the job flexibility, that it's about the deliverables and not necessarily the day-to-day process. Looking at big picture.
Yeah.
I think it's also really interesting what you say, that when your basic needs, like you have healthcare, you're paid properly, you're not in a toxic work environment actually creates the ground for you to be able to focus on how well you can do your job, because you're not worrying about all the foundational things.
Right.
So that's a really interesting point also. What are some of the most common stressors that you've come up against in your career?
I would say that not knowing why we are doing what we are doing are the biggest stressors. So I put a lot of effort in something that I have no idea why am I doing this, and I don't know how good is good, how close we are to the final objective. Am I moving in the right direction? The uncertainty about everything that is, I don't know, organizational changes or top management changes, or, are we selling the company? Are we not selling the company? And clearly there are certain information that are not open to everybody. And I do not expect clearly this kind of relationship with the employees, but at least an open and clear communication, a frequent communication, I think that would help. And the third thing is probably the something that is unfortunately very much the norm in Italy is the blaming culture. So whatever happened, I need someone to blame. So the consequence of that is that nobody is taking the responsibility of making an extra effort, doing the extra mile, because it's very uncommon to receive praise, and it's very hard to get celebrated and recognized for something that ended up well. It's much easier to be blamed for something that didn't work, small or big, and so nobody wants really to do any moves, because if I move and if I fail, then everybody's finger pointing at me. And that's pretty much the stress elements of that I have experienced in my work.
And when you come up against these things, so uncertainty, and actually uncertainty is the brain's least favorite state of being, because it wants to do well. Everybody wants to do well at what they're doing but it doesn't know what, as you said, like what is good, what's the measure of good. And so it is actually there are two states that are crazy for the brain, and one is uncertainty and the other is being wrong. So no, you got them both, like without knowing anything. Being wrong, the body actually suffers in the same way that it does as physical pain. So we live the idea of being wrong really brutally. Like when you were in those states and these situations were happening, and you were feeling this stress through the uncertainty or the fact that like you didn't know if you were being wrong or right, how were you working? Like how did you find your own performance was in those moments?
Not at my best, for sure, despite the effort and the time and the energy that I was putting in my work, because I have a very strong sense of responsibility. So it's very unlikely that I do, okay, oh, I don't want to do this, and just quitting. But the emotional and energetic drain that I was feeling coming back home, I could barely, wake up in the morning or have energy to do anything else after the work day, or being very, nervous, or just very, very silent, like not willing to engage with other people, not willing to talk to other people. The result is that I tend to close very much into myself and being very lonely, and this clearly doesn't help.
Well, it's a common mood response that when you are in a state of uncertainty, because you're afraid you can close down. Some people get aggressive, others tend to close in on themselves, but it's a natural response to it. And obviously one of the problems of dealing with stress in the workplace, because it does change your mood, and then it changes how you behave and how you show up with others. As you said, you were less open to other people, and we tend to be less collaborative, and and less engaging with other people in that.
And also another thing that is I've seen in the past years when I've had teams, it's very hard to manage a team when you're feeling like that, because you feel that you cannot promise them anything. You don't, how can I engage them if I am myself not very much engaged? And what can I tell them if I don't know in the first place how this thing is going to handle, how it's evolving, and what's the situation? So I feel bad for myself, but I also feel bad as a team leader, because I don't know how to manage these people that is looking at me, looking for answers or just for motivation, even small, and I'm unable to give this to them.
And in these moments that you have them, because obviously every company goes through them, some are temporary, some are really the company's MO, and that's how they keep it. How do you find the mood of the team is in those situations?
Well, clearly depends. Each single person is a different character, right? But what I have been experiencing is that the team become very emotional. And so every little thing is like big drama, even in the smallest part of the day. And another thing that happens very often is that they're very, they're defending themselves. So like sandbagging a lot. Oh yeah, I can do this, but I'm not sure it's gonna be okay, because I cannot do this and this and that. So really much set up the stage to kind of prevent a failure and say, yeah, I'm telling you I'm gonna do this, but actually I don't feel confident in the results. So there is no excitement about new projects. There is no excitement about new information. Everything new is seen as something that is potentially dangerous rather than exciting.
Right. And that also fits perfectly with the natural brain response to that, because it is fear. So they, as you said before, nobody wants to take responsibility because then you're wrong. So better to sort of put out as many excuses beforehand.
Right.
Right. Well, what's that saying that they say, that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan?
That's nice. I'm gonna use it.
Nobody wants the failure, but everyone was involved in the success. And just talking about how they were like when they were in a bad mood, what were the circumstances when you were in like a great working environment, when things were working really well? What did that look like? Like, what was good about it?
Okay. So for me, it's many different things. So one is, again, knowing where we're heading. Can be, the finish line can be very close or can be very far away, maybe years ahead of us. But if I know where the direction is, I feel very much engaged and very enthusiastic about the journey. Being given trust. That for me is very, very important. I need to feel that I'm in a team, or that my supervisor can trust me in the daily job, so that I can handle the situation, that I'm trustworthy, but also the team. You can trust me in, telling me what's not working, or telling me if you made a big mistake, and I can help you out with that. So feeling that there is mutual trust with the team, the supervisors, the co-workers, the peers. So living in an environment in which I don't have to watch my back, because that is going to drain a lot of energy, and I want to focus on the project and on the result. And then I would say being around cool people, like people I can learn, that I know that is very, it's priceless, I think, probably, and I've learned it the hard way. So I have been having a very blessed 10 years. and then in which all these things magically aligned, all this planet magically aligned, and where I felt I grew the most. So I was given a territory in which I could fail, and I did fail, and I learned a lot from those failures. I had a lot of people I could learn from, team members, my peers, people that were more experienced than I was, people that were constantly giving me not paternalistic advices, but really, they would help me because they were caring about not necessarily me, but about the project. And then people that it was just fun to work with, fun to chill out with, and people from all different backgrounds I could literally learn from, and it was exciting just to be around them. Not necessarily talking about work all day, but even just talking about our life, and really people that you would love to be with even outside of work. I know it's a big privilege. I know that there is people that work 40 years without even getting closer to this kind of situation, but for me that I've experienced that's the thing that I miss the most on one side, and on the other side I'm very grateful for, because at least I have experience for a quite good amount of time.
And I love the idea that you say about having safe space to fail, because it allows people to be inventive. It takes off that pressure of the responsibility of failing. Like if it's like, okay, let's try this, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. That allows people to sort of show up in a more creative and inventive and fail forward kind of way.
Yeah,
which
and
isn't
also I think
common.
For me, that I have been very judgmental. So I have been measuring other people based on my own standards and based on my own motivation. And I learned over time through failure, I learned that not all the people are motivated by the same things. And so somehow it made me less judgmental and easier to work with. And it relaxed a lot the working environment, because you know that, yes, probably someone didn't do the job properly, but you did the same. Maybe not right now, but maybe 2 months ago you did a lousy job, or so it becomes, everything becomes more human.
Right. That's what I was just about to say. So actually showing up to work as a human as opposed to a boss.
Yeah, exactly.
So going back to the idea you said before, that when you get into those moods or into those spaces, that it's hard for you to find motivation for yourself. So it's even harder for you to motivate your team. What do you do when you find yourself in those places?
Sometimes it's very, small things, but that can change at least the mood for the next meeting or the mood of the day. Music helps me a lot. Maybe just, on my commute, listening to a playlist that gives me energy or lift me up. It's a very small things. When I am upset, I carve out some time to just walk. Maybe just around the block, it's just, but just walk alone and trying to steam off. And when I really cannot leave the premises because I have been watched very closely, I just carve out like 10 minutes of my time to do something that I love. Could be, I don't know, looking at someone that make me laugh on social, or just booking that ticket to that show, or that trip that I really want to make. And just, knowing that, okay, I'm here, this is a very black hole right now, but I'm planning for something very good. So just be happy with that.
And actually, interestingly, anticipation. So that's an interesting point that you bring up. Anticipation, like when we do something, we create an experience for ourselves in the future. You get like 3 times as much happiness out of it, because not only do you have the experience, but then you have all that time where you're looking forward to it. Right. So it's one of those small investment things that pays out really big, especially in terms of mood, is planning something you love to do in the future. So good on you. And what do you do to keep your team and colleagues motivated?
I try. Again, for me, it has been the most challenging thing because I was really literally feeling the responsibility of cheering up these people. I can deal with myself. I mean, not all the time. Sometimes the body speaks for you, right? So sometimes your mood really affects your body in a very literal way. But managing the team in this stressful moment is very hard. What I'm trying to do is to set our own team objectives. So in terms of where do we want to be in this amount of time, which is not the classic, MBO kind of schedule, but more, as a team, where do we want to be? In terms of project, what do we want to achieve? Is not a specific number attached to that, but more a place where, I don't know, in 3 months' time, I can look back and see how much have I done? How much have we done as a team? The second thing is always keep, and I see this as been very reassuring for my team. So they've always been very grateful to me for this. I keep my conversation very open and honest. So they know they can come in anytime with anything. And I promise them that I wouldn't lie or sugarcoat things to them. And that's very in very uncertain environments, that's, I feel it has been very important. So they always know what is coming from me. No hidden agenda, no unsaid things. It works very well for me as well, because I don't like gray areas that much. So I move in a very goofy way in situation in which I cannot say it out plainly. So it helps me actually being myself.
So you're a terrible liar.
Yes. Yes, and not just a liar, but also when I'm trying not to say something, it shows all over the place. So I promised myself I wouldn't do that, because they end up being even more concerned. It's like with kids, when you don't tell them something, they make such a big thing in their head that it's better to just keep them real and tell them exactly what is going to happen. And probably the third thing, which is very, very silly and very, sometimes I just bring up some chill out moment that needs to be very spontaneous. It could be, I don't know, ice cream for everybody, and I just go downstairs and bring ice cream to everybody. Or it can be something, and for me, it's very important that it's spontaneous, because I've also been in an environment in which everything was very scheduled. Oh, we have some together time, we have some team time, and that's so bad when people really doesn't want to be there, and they just feel forced to be longer in an environment where they really don't want to be. So very small gestures of kindness, but in a very spontaneous way, nothing too much organized.
Right. Like, make sure you show up happy on Friday morning, because it's our bonding time.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is actually part of joy, the emotion, is surprise. So the fact that it is spontaneous enables somebody to, even if they were in a bad mood, it's actually something that can snap them out of it pretty quickly. So what do you think, you talked about some ways that you motivate your people. What do you think are going to be some wellness interventions that we'll be seeing increasingly in the future, that either companies can provide or that employees are interested in, things that you think are going to resonate more into the future?
Well, I think we are seeing that, I mean, clearly in these past 2 years, that flexibility has been one of the main things that happened in working environments that would never even consider people working from home. I think we still need to learn from this experience, because again, it has been a nightmare for someone or a wonderful experience for other people. Usually the discriminator is, do you have child that are in school yet or not? No, but besides that, it's literally, the always on culture and the right to disconnection. This whole thing, I think we still have to learn, but I think that one of the things we will see more and more is the understanding that you can work basically from everywhere, and your physical presence is not necessarily required in one physical space. The other thing is probably the use of technology like apps or anything that can help companies having the pulse of what is the mood and the engagement of an organization in a very immediate way, and also in a very playful and engaging way. And I would encourage companies to have more. We are discussing a lot of mental health, and I think that mental health should be discussed also, and especially in the working environment, offering possibilities of support, but also possibilities of coaching program, not necessarily psychiatrist in the office. Why not? But maybe even more, coaching program and some support on how do I recognize where I'm meeting my breaking point? How do I develop coping strategy? Again, I think that it's like when you do sport, right? It's when you're at a certain level, your body is so well trained to do those things that what really matters in winning or losing is your mental state. And I think with working is exactly the same thing. I personally, I've always encountered people that was technically able to do their job. They know what they were doing. They were competent people. But what was missing in that moment was really, am I engaging enough? Am I motivated enough? Am I happy? Am I understanding where I want to go? How can I use my resources in a more efficient and effective way? And this is something that I really stress a lot with my teams usually, is that you have a given set of energy, right? And you can learn ways to improve it, so to have more energy, or to learn how to not dissipate that energy. But since you have been given that amount of energy, try not to focus on the wrong things. Try to spend that energy on the things that really, really matters. So for example, all the gossips or the spiraling around scenarios that you don't have control over, just put your energy in something that you can control. I think that a support in that respect, I think it would be helpful at every single level. What is happening usually is that executive level, you have all of that, but then the moment you go a little bit down, and where probably you have the less motivated people, there is not such the same level of attention. And honestly, I think that it's easier to keep an executive motivated. I mean, and not just because of the money, but just you're more central in the information process. You have more access to information. It's tougher to keep the teams motivated, or even those people that have a very routinary job, people that do the same things over and over again, but they deserve to be healthy and happy as well as the rest of the organization.
And that's interesting because there is obviously a lot of support that goes into executives, and there's a lot of very quality support that goes into executives. However, as you say, most of the teams get their motivation from their immediate boss, from their leader. So not only investing in the executives' motivation as an executive, but teaching them how to be a pillar of motivation for their own team is really where you get the best sort of bang for your buck in terms of training. I don't know if you've ever seen Billions. Do you watch Billions?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay. I'm still upset over season 5, but we won't talk about
Yeah,
it.
right.
What do you think about the role of having that sort of psychiatrist, motivation, performance coach on site that you can just pop into at any moment, anytime you're kind of like feeling in a weird space?
Yeah, it felt almost as a magical creature, right? I mean, a room in which you can just burst into and you're feeling down, and she's prepping you up for incredible performances. That would be a dream, actually.
And it's interesting because I've never worked in financial services or in banks. I know it's actually not super common, but I know they have them there because there's just like so much money that's changing hand that's well worth the investment. But I think it's so interesting to have that figure, like even as a security net, that if you were like, it's kind of like when I lived in New York, I never went to the museums, but I always could if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And that made me peaceful, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea that you have it there if you need it, I think is quite interesting and something I would definitely be investigating myself if I was in that position. But let me get you the last question here.
Mm-hmm.
What 3 pieces of advice would you give to a young person entering the workforce today?
Wow. Number 1, choose the environment and the challenge of a project instead of the prestige of the company. There are some workplaces that are just super shiny if you look at them from outside, but they are completely toxic on the inside. So try to pay attention to, even when you go to an interview, you know, how do they look? People that work there, how do they look? Do they look happy or scared or incredibly stressed? And choose more, you know, the people you can learn from, instead of a very shiny sign outside, but that can make you miserable over time. The second would be coming from a workaholic that is constantly pushing the limits, is listen to your body and make clear requests of what you need to perform at your best. Which doesn't mean whining, but take also responsibility for the things that you think are not working and the obstacles that, if removed, would allow you to be at your best. When you are young, you are more resistant by definition. I mean, I could, work hard, play hard, and show up the next morning 7 a.m. fresh as a rose. If I do that today, I would probably need 3 days to recover.
I'll see you in a week.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take a few days off. So pay more attention. Your body is very resistant, but don't push the limit too hard. Try to take a closer look at the signs that tells you that's not good for you, that environment is not good for you, but make clear requests. So be part of the solution and not just go to your boss whining because this and that. And probably the third thing is I have been mentoring young adults in the past years. And sometimes I felt that they tend to take the mood of one day as a proxy of their entire experience. So it's okay to assess your mood even daily if you want, and going back from work saying, has it been a good day? Has it been a bad day? How do I feel? But at the same time, give it time. So when you make a judgment and when you make a decision, try to look back to a longer period of time, because something that may feel unbearable or overwhelming one day, maybe over time it becomes it becomes normal or more acceptable or even fun, something that you probably didn't know it was fun at the beginning. They tend most of the times to make very short time assessments that are very generic and very pessimistic overall, and they just want to quit because this thing isn't working. Try to enlarge the breadth of your judgment. That's what I would say.
That's an interesting feedback, because obviously every job is going to have great days and it's going to have bad days.
Absolutely.
I mean, even speaking about my favorite job that I ever had, like when I first got there, it was hell. It was hell because it was absolutely hell. There was nobody there. That we were like the new guard. They didn't want us. They were working against us. People were actively trying to sabotage everything that we were doing. And I went home frequently near tears, but, in a short period of time or a year later, things were already different. We had built it and we were growing, and it just, it got better and better. There's always going to be bad parts to your job, but it doesn't mean the job is bad ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And, I know that probably young people wouldn't like this, because they feel special and unique, and all this thing about follow your dreams. Follow your dreams is very important, but can you supply for yourself? I mean, can you be independent with your dreams? If you can be independent with your dreams, that's great. I've seen so many people like quitting the job and to be travel influencer, and it's fantastic if you can actually live out of that. But otherwise, you have to come to work every day and try to make it a pleasant experience, as something that enriches you, instead of classify everything like, oh, this is terrible and it's toxic just because that single person or that single day was a shitty one, right?
Yeah. I actually want to go back to the first two things that you said, just to get a little bit more, go into them a teeny bit more. You talked about taking a look at the environment, like when you go into interview, see it. What are some of the red flags that you can tell from kind of outside that an environment is toxic?
I can tell you a personal anecdote and experience. So I really wanted to get this job in beauty, and it was really my dream job. And I got invited for an interview. So I was literally over the moon, especially coming from the industry I was previously working in that has nothing to do with beauty. So I never felt that I could be a good fit, a good candidate for that kind of job. Finally, they call me. The interview is at 7 p.m. and I'm like, fine, great. I mean, after work, I can go to the interview. And they make me wait for 2 hours. 2 hours. I had my interview at 9. And I didn't even blink an eye to say, oh, I'm going to leave now. I mean, guys, 2 hours. I was just literally waiting there for my interview to come. And then finally, they interview me and they have to pass through this corridor, and I see literally it was daylight in there. Everybody was sitting at their desk working like it was a normal Tuesday noon moment. Everybody was sitting there. Nobody was even attempting to go out. It was 9 p.m. at night. And I completely disregarded all these signs completely. And then I got hired. And then the HR person confessed me that I was the last one of a very long day of interview, that she wanted to send me home because she thought I wasn't fit because I was coming from another industry. But then after the interview, she was very excited. So they offered me this job. And for 1 year, I have been working literally 23 hours a day. 23 hours a day, and I was just going back home, get a shower and coming back, and I usually was in the office by 7:30 a.m. and my boss would tell me, you are late today. It was just a nonsense environment. I learned so much. I mean, I learned really a lot. It was like, a fast track course, because when you have 23 hours a day, you better swim or sink. And
it's 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. So in just 12 months, I learned probably what I should have learned in 1 year. But emotionally was really, really, I think it got me really scared. So every time that I take an interview for another job, I always ask, what's the schedule? What's the culture? What's the work-life balance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because that got me really, really scared. And it's incredible how my brain was completely shut down when I was doing the interview, because I really wanted that so bad that I cut out all the noise and I just focused on that. But the signs of toxicity were there. I just didn't pay attention.
Right. It's the name of the job looked really good, but the contents of the job were not so healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us and for sharing all of your experience. It was lovely to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I hope we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Moodally Matters. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Moodally Matters.